Welcome back to another episode of Authors and Espresso. I'm your host, Nadia Gilkes, and we are here with another festival flashback. This week, we are going back to 2021, revisiting the interview that I did with Dr. Shafeeq Ameen. At that time, he'd released two books back to back, HBCU Pride and A Message to a Fatherless Generation. Let's listen in about his experience as a Black male educator and his publishing journey. Our next guest spent the last 30 years as an educator teaching from elementary school all the way to the collegiate level. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from Virginia State University, a Master's of Education in Early Childhood Education from Norfolk State University, a Master of Education Administration from Regent University, and a PhD in Education Leadership from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. He basically did a tour of Virginia colleges, basically. Last year, he released two books back to back, HBCU Pride and Message to a Fatherless Generation. And these books also can be found on Amazon. I just want you to see the covers real quick. HBCU Pride and A Message to Fatherless Generation. Here today, all the way from, of course, Virginia, please help me welcome Dr. Shafeeq Ameen.
Hello, everyone.
How are you?
Hello. Pleasure being here.
Thank you so much for coming in today. It was a pleasure crossing your path on social media, and I was ecstatic when you said that you were available to do the festival because your resume speaks volumes. And I didn't realize how rare it was that we have Black male educators out there. And I mentioned to you yesterday, I saw a posting on Facebook about a week ago that said, when was the first time you had a Black male teacher? And when I thought about it, I was actually in high school before that happened. I've only had that twice in my life. So You are a rarity. So what made you go into education? Because clearly you don't have a lot of images to look up to and follow in that path.
Well, if you could imagine, even though I hold a PhD, I was a horrible student. I was a horrible student in elementary and middle school. And what happened was once I got to high school, I had an English teacher, a Black female, and she just pulled me up by the collar and said, "You need to get your life together." She was the impetus for me to change everything around. And what was the real turning point after that is I had the honor and the pleasure and the privilege of attending historically Black college, and they became my family, and education has been my cornerstone ever since that.
That's amazing. And I see that you're getting shout outs in the chat. Virginia's in the house.
Yo, hey, there you go.
And I didn't have the pleasure of going to an HBCU, but why was that important to make that part of your journey?
It gave me a sense of pride. I grew up in Philadelphia, and the majority of schools that I attended were predominantly, if they weren't predominantly white, that at least 90% of the teaching staff was white. And I didn't have a good sense about my cultural heritage, about myself as a Black man, a Black teenager at the time. And when I went to a historically Black college, I saw for the first time African American college professors. I saw individuals who look like me excited to make a change and a difference in the world. And just the sense of Black pride and unity is something that has stayed with me for over 40 years. And it's been a godsend.
Wonderful. And so you end up writing a book, HBCU Pride. What lessons do we get from this book?
It was my opportunity to give back to Virginia State University. They became my surrogate parent once I went off to college and went to Virginia State as a immature young man, and I left a mature, awoke, academically prepared man, prepared for the world. And it was all due to Virginia State, and I wanted to try to give back in a small measure what this great university gave to me.
And the book of yours that really caught my eye was Message to a Fatherless Generation, which I'm excited that you're going to talk a little bit about and thank you
Absolutely.
for giving me a copy. So what was the purpose for this book?
Well, I have, as you mentioned earlier, I've been a elementary, middle, and high school teacher, and one constant that I saw with the African American males that I was teaching is that a good percentage of them were being raised without their fathers, and I saw the devastating impact that it had on them emotionally, academically. They were fragile in terms of being able to contend with any trauma that was going on in their lives, anything small. I had a lot of the young men, as you mentioned earlier, who hadn't been around the African American male who was a professional, that they just gravitated towards me. And I saw what could happen if these young men actually had their fathers in their lives. And the book was not to condemn fathers for not being there for their children, especially their sons, but actually as a rallying cry to get these fathers to come back because our kids, especially our boys, they need us desperately.
It definitely makes a difference, even if you're not a two-parent household living together, just being involved makes a big difference, and a lot of people sometimes confuse because 'cause I've gone through this as a divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
Those people that say, "If he's not paying me child support money, I'm not letting him see the kid," and it's like, those
Right.
are 2 separate issues. It
Absolutely.
really makes a
Absolutely.
difference when there's not that accountability at home and there's that male dominant figure that's the disciplinarian or whatever the role that they're carrying. And I can only imagine in your years of education, you've likely had to be a father to many children yourself because
Absolutely.
they
Absolutely.
didn't have
And
child.
and one thing I did want to mention really quickly, and I'll talk about this in the breakout session, is that when I did interviews with prisoners, that I found out that a good percentage of the prisoners, when you ask them what led you to a life of crime and to have your life turned upside down, they said the thing that could have been my saving grace was to have my father in my life.
Mm.
And they echoed that sentiment over and over and over. So it's needed.
It is needed, and it's not only I wish I had my father in my life, but a lot of times you'll watch these documentaries and it becomes the cycle. Like you'll see people with
Right.
3 generations down the line all in prison, which is heart-wrenching. And,
Right.
like I mentioned to the run-through crew last night, I separated you and Crystal Wyatt, didn't have you guys in the same breakout session because she provides services. That's the other piece of the puzzle. Like she
Hmm.
provides support to families with a loved one in prison, but it is so important that we need to break the cycle. So I love that you took your education and knowledge and used it to put out a message to hopefully get people more involved. Have you turned this into any type of support group or community atmosphere where you have roundtable discussions, or have you considered that?
I've been involved in about 6 podcasts so far where we've developed roundtable discussions with men from all spheres. So we had, men on the panel who were married, some were divorced, some were having legal issues, having involvement with their kids. And then we had young men on who were new fathers and they were looking for individuals like myself to kind of walk them through the process of trying to be the best dads that they could be. And it's been very, very beneficial. And we need more men who are willing to step up to the plate because we need to find a way, if not to get our families back together, to at least make sure that these fathers don't abandon their kids because they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's such an important piece of the puzzle, and I really try to talk to couples, especially when they're starting to co-parent. And sometimes you say parenting classes, and you get this kind of side glance or this
Right.
odd reaction. But I think it's so important, even in the classes that are often sometimes they're court ordered, but they're beneficial because it just makes sure that everybody's on the same page, that
Right.
everything's going on the same in both households, and you're not using language that's putting down the other parent, and all those little
Absolutely.
nuances are just so important to raising a healthy child. So I love that you're making the rounds on podcasts. I
Absolutely.
hope that you may want to jump into Clubhouse with this because there's so many important conversations that have been started there. So
Oh,
I
absolutely.
absolutely appreciate your work. So you mentioned it a little bit, but what is going to happen in your breakout room?
So in the breakout room, I have a PowerPoint set up, and I will go through some readings of Fatherless Generation, start to work on that. And then I definitely want to have an extensive Q&A because I like to not just talk to fathers, but I like to talk to mothers too, because a lot of times when the fathers drop the ball, that all that's left there is the mothers, and they have to deal with so much from the kids who are missing the fathers, and the kids have to lash out. They have to get the emotions out, and the ones that they tend to let that anger out on is the mothers. So I like to be a support system to let them know it, it's not them. We just got to get the brothers together.
Mm, that's powerful. And because we are self-published authors, I also like to give a nod to your journey, and you released 2 books back to back. So can you give us
Absolutely.
one little, nugget of inspiration for somebody who may be thinking of writing a book and they think it's a little daunting? What was your experience like? How was that for you? Success, one nugget of success and one pitfall to be aware of.
When you seriously decide to take an idea and allow it to grow into an actual novel. You know, as a male, I don't know what it's like to have a child, to give birth to a child, but that's the way it felt like with the book. Just to go through that process, and when you get that copy in the mail, that author's copy, and you see the hard work you put in, it's so gratifying. So
That's
gratifying.
amazing. That I would say that's spot on. I've never birthed a child either, but it felt like this is my baby, and then you're
Yeah,
so protective and you put your work out into the world and then you open yourself up for, whatever feedback you're gonna get. But I think it's
absolutely.
worth it in the end because you're doing amazing things. I just
Oh,
want to
thank
share
you.
this book one more time. Message to a Fatherless Generation. We will have this as part of our giveaways during our trivia segment at the end of the festival. So
Great.
stick around. You may win that as a copy. And if not, both of the links to his books are in the chat. You can go to Amazon right now, pick those up as well. Dr. Shafeeq Ameen, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. That was a wonderful conversation with Dr. Shafeeq Ameen. And since the festival in 2021, he has released another book, Parenthood 101, the blueprint for raising academically successful and socially conscious children. His first book is also still available, Odyssey, The Road Less Traveled, a personal account of the transformational power of historical Black colleges. All of his works can be found on Amazon. We will try to catch up with him and see what he's been doing since the pandemic. Until then, thank you for tuning in to Authors in Espresso. Check back to see who our guest is next week.